Outsourcing tends to have a bad reputation as being low quality. Partner Hero's value-based approach raises the bar for the outsourcing industry by investing in employee empowerment and career growth, paying above-market salaries, and maintaining a focus on quality and performance. They're more than a service provider. They're also a thought partner for the startups they serve. It's simple. Brands that care about quality customer experience choose Partner Hero. They offer flexible terms and the ability to scale quickly, perfect for startups, with quality assurance baked into every program and offices around the world. So Partner Hero can provide truly global coverage. Outsourcing has long been available mainly to big businesses, but Partner Hero is challenging business as usual by bringing the benefits of outsourcing to businesses of all sizes with short, flexible contracts and fast ramp-up times. 10 years ago, when we were launching the Action Catalyst, we could have used a few extra hands to help us scale quickly, even if it was just for a short while. You can bet that with their expertise, fast onboarding, and core focus on quality, Partner Hero would have had our attention. If you're ready to bring in outside customer support help for your startup that feels like it's a part of an existing team, check out Partner Hero. Head over to partnerhero.com/Action Catalyst to book a free consultation with our solutions team. Mention you heard about Partner Hero from the Action Catalyst, and they'll even waive the setup fee. Now, on to the show.
From Nashville, Tennessee, Southwestern Family of Companies welcomes you to the Action Catalyst. Each week, we share insights and inspiration from movers and shakers in the world of business. Our goal is to help you increase your self-discipline, overcome procrastination, and help you to take action on all the things that really matter.
How did you get started in the professional speaking industry? How do you become a speaker? That is one of the most common questions that I get asked, actually, on a pretty regular basis, and that is going to be the theme of what we're talking about today, and you will hear from none other than the legendary Brian Tracy, a friend of mine that I've developed over the years. I'm going to interview Brian. You're going to hear his story about he got started in the business, and after that, you're going to get to hear some of my story, and I think you'll see a lot of commonalities between the two stories, and he's just an amazing man who has impacted millions and millions of people. And I just want you to listen, though, because you may not want to be a professional speaker, and that's fine. Maybe you do want to become a better speaker, and I think you'll get some tips here that will help you. But it's not about becoming a professional speaker. Really, it's about achieving your dream, and it's about finding something that you love and pursuing something that you think can make a real difference in the world, and believing in yourself enough to go after it. That's what we're really talking about today. And you're going to get to hear me and really one of the legends in the industry talk. We'll get started just after this message.
This episode is sponsored by Southwestern Coaching. Southwestern Coaching has helped over 11,000 people increase their incomes by over 25% on average. As a successful salesperson, you know the importance of increasing your sales, but sometimes you might just need a little extra push and accountability to meet your goals and grow your business. Southwestern Coaching will help you increase your income through one-on-one sales and leadership coaching tailored specifically to your needs. Together, we will elevate sales. To schedule your free one-on-one business action planning session with a Southwestern coach, go to www.southwesternconsulting.com/action catalyst.
I am incredibly honored, and hopefully you will feel very lucky and blessed to get a chance to listen and learn at the feet here of truly one of the legends in this business. His name is Brian Tracy, and he certainly needs no introduction. But if you haven't heard of Brian Tracy, he has spoken to more than 5 million people, 5,000 talks he's done, 70 countries. He speaks to about 250,000 people a year. He has written over 70 books, 300 audio programs. The Psychology of Achievement is one of the most popular, which has been translated into 28 languages. And Brian is just an amazing guy. And I ran into him and his wife Barbara in the airport, and I asked him if I could steal a few minutes, and he agreed. So welcome to the show, sir.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much. How are you?
Very good. Very good. So I think one of the things that you and I seem to have in common is this personal fascination with self-discipline. And of course you have Eat That Frog and No Excuses and several other things that you've done where you talk a lot about self-discipline. So how did you develop sort of that same passion around the topic?
Well, I'm a voracious reader, and I have been all my life. So, and also I started off with very little. So without self-discipline and hard work and focus, you really can't accomplish anything. Well, many years ago, two stories. I read all the works of Napoleon Hill, which I think everybody should do in their 20s, before they move on to our books. It's a good foundation for them. But one of his books was called The Master Key to Riches, and he writes this whole book about success and successful people and overcoming obstacles. And the last paragraph of the last chapter of the last page is, the master key to riches is self-discipline. And I always remember that. And then as I got into the whole field of success studies, I came across a body of work by a man named Kopmeyer. And he was an older man, but he had spent 54 years studying success and eliciting ideas, success principles. And then he wrote 4 books with 250 principles per book. Some of the principles were only 1 or 2 pages long. And then he published these books and sold 40 million copies worldwide. I think I remember saying he sold more copies than the works of Mao Zedong. Millions and millions of copies. And by the time I met him and learned about his material, he had sort of passed his due date. He was no longer famous, and he was older. Anyway, so I'm at an NSA convention in Washington, and I go to for the food fair, and I get some food, and I'm sitting at this table, and it was very busy, and I have a table for 4, and this old man, and obviously his assistant, came along with trays looking for a place to sit, and there was no place to sit. So I got up and I said, "Sir, please join me. I've got lots of room here." He said, "No, I wouldn't want to disturb you." I said, "No, please. It's really busy. Please sit down." So he did. It was Kopmeyer. And wow. I had read all his materials. Our good friend Ty Boyd did an audio program of many of his huge audio program, 12 cassettes. Editing his books, and narrated his books. And so I sat down and we started talking. I told him, "I know you. I've read all your stuff," blah, blah, blah. And then I asked him this question. And the question was, of all these 1,000 success principles, what do you consider to be the most important? And I say he smiled at me with a great charming look. He was 89 at the time. He died, I think, the following year. And he had this big charming smile, as if he had heard this question over and over again. He said, "Brian, the most important success principle is embodied in the words of Albert Hubbard, who said this. He said, self-discipline is the ability to make yourself do what you should do, when you should do it, whether you feel like it or not." He said, if you have that, the other 999 principles will work. But if you don't have self-discipline, the other 999 principles will not help you. And I never forgot that conversation, and I shared it with many people around the world, that self-discipline is the catalyst or the linchpin that makes all the other principles work.
I love that. And it seems like it's not popular. People don't like to hear that necessarily, but you certainly have practiced it. Can you talk about Eat That Frog and where that whole concept came from?
Well, Eat That Frog is, I would just say, it's the best-selling book on time management in history in 42 languages, and it still sells and sells and sells, and it's being reissued in a 3rd edition this year, and we expect it to sell another 3 or 4 million copies. So what it is many years ago I submitted a manuscript to a publisher, and it was called, Double Your Productivity, Double Your Time Off. And they said, well, it's a nice title, but he read it through and he came to one part. It was 21 great ideas to double your productivity, double your time off. And he came to one, and it was called Eat That Frog, one of the 21 ideas. And it said that if you start each day by working on your most important task and get on top of the task, your whole day will be more productive. And the story was that if the first thing you do in the morning is you eat a live frog, you'll have the pleasure of knowing that that's probably the worst thing that's going to happen to you all day long. And then this is in the introduction. I said, and the two corollaries of this rule is that if you have to eat a live frog, it doesn't pay to think about it for very long. And if you have to eat a live frog, eat the ugliest one first. Or if you have to eat more than one frog, eat the ugliest one first. So that they said that is the perfect title. And if we can run the frog analogy throughout the entire book, I think it'll be a top seller. And he was right. Very good publisher. And so Eat That Frog simply says, and it's 21 ways to organize and manage your time. And it basically comes down to the simple principle is organize, set priorities, and determine the most important thing that you can do each morning, and then start on that one task and stay with it 100% until it's complete. If you could do that, you can conquer the world. And if you do that on a regular basis, the payoff to you will be extraordinary. And so that's what the book does. And people say, but companies buy thousands of them. People say it literally changes their life. Rags to riches, life transformed, best book they ever had. And all it says is get organized, plan, set priorities, pick your most important task, and do the worst first. Start on your most important task. And that simple concept, that simple idea, has been helpful to millions of people.
And so you talk about how, these ideas, self-discipline, doing the hard thing first, how that can change somebody's life. And it changed your life. And I think a lot of people don't realize kind of where you started from. So could you just give us a little bit of like what things were like for you? And then how did you make the entree into this industry? Because this wasn't even really, you and Zig and Cavett and Tom Hopkins and it was like Jim Rohn. It seems like you guys made this an industry. It didn't used to be an industry. So can you talk about like where you came from and how you got involved with all this?
Well, I think everybody has turning points in their life. And I started off, I didn't graduate from high school. And I was told that if you didn't graduate from high school, if you didn't go to college, you wouldn't do very well at life. You wouldn't get a good job. You wouldn't marry well. You wouldn't earn very much money. And so I bought that. And the first job I got was washing dishes. And I thought that my future lied in being a really good dishwasher. In fact, I had a plan once, and my plan was to get 2 8-hour shifts, day shift and evening shift, in 2 hotels as a dishwasher, and work from 8 to 5 in one, and then 5 to midnight in the other, and race in between. I thought if I could work 16 hours a day as a dishwasher, then by gum, that would be the key to success, and I could rest on the one day off each week. Well, that didn't work out. So I washed cars, I washed floors. I say that I thought washing was in my future, but one by one the jobs went by, and I worked in construction, I worked in factories, I worked digging wells, I worked on farms, I worked on a ship. When I was 23 years old, I was working on the harvest as an itinerant farm laborer, sleeping in the farmer's barn, getting up at dawn before sunrise, eating with the farmer's family, and then working in the fields all day to bring in the harvest before the first frost. And that was where I was going at 23. And when I could no longer find a job in labor, the only thing I could do to eat was to find a job in straight commission selling, door to door, where if you didn't sell something, you didn't eat. There was no base pay or anything else. And I had to discipline myself. Fortunately, I've always been disciplined. I've always had a certain amount of self-control, but I had to discipline myself to get up at 6:30 in the morning and be out knocking on doors at 8 o'clock when people came to work, and knock on doors all day, offices and industrial parks, and then in the evening I'd go out and knock on homes and apartment doors until 9 or 9:30, sometimes even 10 o'clock. I was selling a variety of things. One time I was selling a bonus book where if you paid $20, you got a card, and this card entitled you to discounts from more than 100 retailers, mostly restaurants and fast food places. So it worked out well, but it sold for $20, and I got an $8 commission. And sometimes I'd work 12, 14 hours in a day and not make one sale. Eventually, I learned how to sell. I start to study the craft of selling, started working on selling. I started to learn introductory techniques and then closing techniques. And one day I hit up on a closing technique that tripled my sales. Within a month, I was the sales manager, training over 20 people on how to sell this citywide. It changed my life. And so I always say I had three major turning points. I've had a lot of turning points in my life that, in retrospect, were the difference between life and death. But I still remember three. And it's interesting because when you look at successful people, they report the same three. The first was when I discovered, at the age of 21, that I was responsible for my own life. I was a construction laborer, and I was living in a one-room apartment, and it was 35 degrees below zero outside, and I had just enough money to get through the week and through the month. And I was sitting there in my little apartment, and I realized that this is my life, that if I don't change it, if I don't do something different, then nothing's going to change for me. I'm responsible. And I still remember that, almost like a flashbulb going off in my face. And that started a shift in my life. I started to be going down a different road. The second thing I discovered some years later was goals. The importance of written goals and plans and working on them in a disciplined way every day. So now what I teach is, once you accept responsibility, the question you have to ask is responsibility for what? And the answer is to do what you need to do to achieve the goals that are important to you. Discipline yourself to get up earlier, work harder, stay later, and so on. And the third thing that changed my life was the discovery of personal development. Reading, learning, listening, upgrading my skills. And those three, like a golden triangle, are the life-transforming discoveries. So later on we have really popular books like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Right. Chapter 1, take control, accept responsibility. Jack Canfield, Success Principles. Chapter 1, take control, accept responsibility. Every great man or woman, every high-powered person is really highly responsible. And that's a tremendous discipline.
And I think a lot of people don't realize, I remember, I think the first time that I actually got a chance to talk to you was at an NSA event. I was volunteering for this lab for NSA, and I got to interview you. And I remember being blown away at the story where you talked about how you got started in the speaking industry, and how, in our minds, we see somebody who, speaks to 250,000 people every year and sells millions of copies of books. And we see you today. Can you just and I know you probably get this question. I get the question all the time. How did you get in this industry? I want to do what you do. And can you just tell a little bit of the true story of what people don't realize about what it takes to make it as a speaker and an author and, in this industry?
Well, yes, I went to seminars as part of my personal development. I was very hungry to learn new stuff. And as I went to seminars, I started thinking, I could do better than this. I could put together a seminar that was better than this. And then I went to a weekend seminar that cost $500, just an enormous amount of money. And this guy spoke for 2 days, and he was a poor speaker, and he had about 300 or 400 people in the room, and he was handing out cheap mimeographed pages on business building and personal success. And I said, geez, I could do better than this. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put together a seminar. See, everybody looks at you and thinks, well, this is easy. You just stand up there and talk. And so I started thinking about that. And this guy walked in my door one day, and he said, I sell seminars for a large national sales company. I go from office to office. And if you had a seminar, I could sell it for you. And I said, okay. As a matter of fact, I've been thinking of doing that. So I immediately set up a business to give a seminar. And I started with a 2-day seminar, a weekend seminar, Saturday, Sunday. And I worked back from there. And I spent 300 hours putting this seminar together and planning it. And this guy, I said he was going to go out and sell the seminar. He'd fill the room. He ended up, after 2 months, an enormous amount of money. He got 7 people in a room, 6 of whom were members of my family or extended family. Only one was paid. And I was paying him a base pay, everything else. And it was always next year country. Next time we're going to have a lot of people. The guy just worked me for the base of pay. And after that seminar, I fired him and I went out and started selling my own. So I have a little story. I think I told you. I said, when I started speaking, I learned how to sell all over again. I sold my house, I sold my car, I sold my furniture, I sold everything I'd ever saved in my life, and I went completely broke. I sold my house and I had to move to a rented house. I had just gotten married, I had a child, and I had 2 children, and I advertised. I advertised in newspapers and radio and TV. I even took out a billboard once. I did direct mail, thousands of pieces of direct mail. And after all of that, there was just dead silence. Nobody responded to any of it. I could have piled it all. I said I could have taken all my brochures and piled them all in a parking lot and burnt them, and I'd have saved money. I'd have saved the postage for the amount of results I got. And so finally I realized that the only way I was going to get people to come to my seminar is I would have to sit down, but go back to basics, put together a presentation, and start knocking on doors and calling on business people and asking them to please come to my seminar. And that's what I did. It took me 2 solid years. It's like an airplane diving toward the ground. It took me 2 solid years to pull it out of the dive and to start to finally make more money than I was spending. And that was my beginning. But it was very hard and very precarious.
And what do you think? I mean, I love that you're a student first. I think it's another one of the sort of natural affinities that we've had is I think sometimes people call me author, speaker, whatever, entrepreneur, but it's like I'm very much a student first. And you've been a legendary teacher, but you've always, even now, such a student and such a reader. Are there any things that, like as you think towards the future, you think about how is the industry changed? And is there anything that anything that you wish was different about the direction we were going, or that you really love about the direction that the industry, like the personal development industry is heading, or anything that you would wish for it to become more like or return to the way it used to be?
Well, my motivation, people say, why did you start speaking? Well, I was so excited about these ideas, and these ideas were on how you could unlock your potential in any direction. It was almost like a powerful nutritional vitamin mix. You take it, and you could do anything better and faster and so on. And that was my excitement. I loved the ideas. So I put together seminars. As I say, I spent 300 hours of study and research and assembling my material for my first 2-day seminar, and then I gave the entire seminar without notes. Basically 2 days, 4 90-minute sessions without notes for 2 days. And the first people who went through the seminar came up and said, this is life-changing, which was, of course, a great motivation for me, and it kept me going. Even through the difficult times, people said over and over again, this is life-changing, this is life-transforming. This seminar, by the way, was called the Phoenix Seminar, and it was based on the phoenix bird and how the phoenix bird consumes itself in flames and then re-arises out of the flames to live another 500 years. So it's the worldwide symbol of transformation. And I took it to Nightingale Keynote. I had somebody to record it. After 2 years of giving the seminar over and over again, I had somebody record it. I sent the tapes to Nightingale Keynote, the cassettes, and they called me back in 2 days and says, we want this. We want to release this as a program. And how soon can you get here? Well, I lived in Edmonton at that time. I said, how about tomorrow? I got the next flight out and flew down to Chicago to meet with Nightingale Keynote, and they released it as a program, and it became the best-selling single success program in the world. It's now gone into 38 languages. I then recorded it on video and turned it into a training program, and then trained facilitators all over the world. And they still, today, there are thousands of people going through it as we speak. I once had 300 centers in China giving this program, translated into Chinese. And it became the Psychology of Achievement, and then it became the book Maximum Achievement. But my whole focus, I was so determined that if you have these ideas, you won't have to spend as many years. I started at 35, 36 years old. If you have these ideas, this can save you years of hard work in getting to the same level. So that has been my whole focus, is to teach people how they can dramatically increase the rate at which they achieve their goals. I did my sales program called The Psychology of Selling, which became the best-selling sales program in the world in 16 languages. I did my programs on time management, which became the best-selling time management programs. And every one was preceded by hundreds of hours of research. and then consolidation, and then practice in front of a large audience. I designed a program, 2 days, how to start, build, manage, or turn around any business, which became the most popular program for entrepreneurs and business owners in the world. And every one of them was based on enormous research. So my whole focus, and I don't mean to take up all your time, but my whole focus has been on helping people by giving them practical ideas that they can use immediately to get better results faster and easier than ever before. Now, when you ask me about the current industry, that's my approach, is I want to help people with practical ideas. And I now have 80 books, all different, 14 books on management, each one with 21 key ideas, each one with several sub-ideas, times 21, plus another 65 books. And I'm now working on 4 more books right now simultaneously. And every one of them is designed to help people be more effective. Now, here's another thing. I always provide written workbooks, detailed workbooks with every talk. I seldom do just keynotes or motivational talks. Everything is practical. Even if I do a 20-minute keynote, it's going to be the 7 key steps to setting and achieving any goal in 20 minutes. Here they are, practical, practical, practical. So my concern about some speakers is that they are light, is they may be motivational, interesting, fun, and so on, but the person afterwards, and I heard this over and over again, the person afterwards says, "That was really good. What did he say? That was really good. What did he say?" I said, like the old advertisement, "Where's the beef?" There's no beef. And that's fine. There's a huge market, I'm sure, for entertainment seminars. My market, what I focus on, is corporations and individuals who really want to improve their sales and profitability faster, or some other part of their lives.
And so I have one more question for you here, but before I dive into that, Brian, where do you want people to go to learn more about you and just kind of get connected with what you're doing, if they're new to you?
Well, what we do is we have an extensive online business at briantracy.com. One word, briantracy.com. And what we do is we give away a lot of really practical materials, self-analysis materials on self-confidence, goal setting, time management, and so on. And then we have some things that you can buy, a much more detailed program. So if you want more information, just go to briantracy.com. And it's one of the most robust and interesting websites in our industry.
We'll put a link to briantracy.com in the show notes, and you guys can check that out. But so my last little question for you here is, in everything that you have studied and learned, what is one thing that you changed your mind on? In other words, you learned it initially, you were convicted that this is the way that things are, you started practicing it, then you go through this whole career, teaching, learning. I know you've worked with Fortune 500 companies and, just huge organizations of all different types. And then now you kind of look back on your life and you go, you know what? I think that my philosophy about X has changed from what I once knew to be true. Now I wonder if it really is.
Well, it's an interesting question. I could probably think of one thing. When I began speaking, I was absolutely determined to just fill every minute with ideas and content. Someone once came up to me after a 90-minute session and said, "I took 80 notes, 80 different points in that 90-minute session, and you made 25 referrals to different scholars' reports and so on." He said, "It's almost overwhelming." And one day I was doing a talk. I was asked by a company president, we have 800 business owners and they all want to become wealthy. Could you do a talk on self-made millionaires? And I said, okay, sure. I mean, that's what we say when we're young speakers. We'll speak on anything. And it was 1 hour at their annual meeting. So I hung up the phone and I realized I didn't really know anything about self-made millionaires. So I did a 2-month full court press studying self-made millionaires. I pulled up the research, I read the books, I took the notes, and I came out with a little talk called the 21 Success Secrets of Self-Made Millionaires. And I gave it at this convention 2 months later, and it was very well received. And people said, "Can you give this at our company? Can you give this at our company?" So I was asked to give it to a group of speakers and business owners, and I had only 60 minutes. And I gave this 21 ideas in 60 minutes, and it was like wham, just like a shot from guns. And it was so much material, it was overwhelming. But I was determined to get through 21 points in 60 minutes. Mm-hmm. And afterwards, Og Mandino, who was the featured speaker at this convention, I spoke to him, and he said, Brian, and this changed my whole speaking life. He said, Brian, he said, that was a good talk and good material. He said, but you've got to romance your points a little bit. And I'll never forget that. You've got to romance your points. He said, give fewer points, but give more stories, give more examples. Slow it down so that people can take it in and assimilate it instead of overwhelming them. And later, I hired Ron Arden, my speaking coach, for 10 years. Best speaking coach in the world, probably. And he worked with me. I worked with him closely for 10 years. And I paid him a fortune, which was worth it. And he told me many, many, many wonderful things about speaking. But one of the things he said is, remember, Brian, they never know what you leave out. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to cover it all if you have a limited amount of time. It's because they never know what you leave out. And then Og Mandino said, you have to romance your points. You take those two ideas together, and I was able to slow my speaking down, give more examples and stories, make it easier to understand, make it more enjoyable, and that had a very profound effect on my life.
What a great lesson. I've never heard the romance your points story. That's such a great one. Well, BrianTracy.com is the place you can go you can get connected to him and learn more. Brian, just I think on behalf of all of us, thank you for your commitment to the industry and for your selfless service to helping millions of people around to achieve all of their goals. And we're very honored to have you.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
What a pleasure and a privilege. So fun to just talk with one of the legends about what it takes to succeed as a speaker and hear his story. And man, he has helped shape this entire industry. You know, as I was reflecting back, and I've been able, as I say, to know Brian and hear some of his story. And one of the things I realized was, I've never really shared my story about how I got started as a professional speaker, and it is one of the most common questions that I get asked. And I thought, hey, you know what? For once and for all, I should talk this through and kind of put it out there in the world so that it's recorded and anybody can listen to it at any time they are curious, because I think Brian and I share a lot in common in terms of our desire and things that kind of got us on the path. But so I'm just going to run through for you. This is my 15-point checklist for how I became a professional speaker. Because for me, when I was like 17 or 18 years old, I knew that I wanted to spend my life reading, writing, researching, and speaking on the topic of self-discipline. I had seen a speaker when I was in 6th grade at Platt Middle School, PMS, and he was really funny, but he told this horrible story about drugs and how his brother died or his best friend died, and he made all these wrong decisions, and I was like, wow, it was really good, and he was funny and uplifting, but it was a really heartbreaking story. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if somebody could talk to people and kids specifically at that time about making good choices? Like, what if you made good choices your whole life? What would the byproduct of that look like if you started making good choices from the time that you were young? And then when I was in, high school, I was in student senate, and I remember we paid a speaker like $1,000 or something, and I was like, this is unbelievable. I can't believe they get paid that much. And I was like, that is the career for me. And so that was kind of like what I knew I wanted to do. And there's so many days now, and even with our team at Southwestern Consulting, and we're an 8-figure business, and we have well over 100 team members, and I guess there's a lot of things that as a team we've really done, and yet there's these times so much today when I still feel behind. Like, I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing, and I still feel like I'm just barely learning, and I have such a far way to go to make the kind of impact that I want to make as a speaker. And yet, I guess when I look back, there's a lot of things that we have progressed on, and it's definitely been a journey with the help of a lot of tremendous people. So I'm just going to lay it out for you, because I think that my story would be pretty scalable, like pretty repeatable, for somebody who really had a desire to speak publicly, or maybe you don't want to do it as your full-time profession, because that's really hard and requires a lot of sacrifice and a lot of travel. But even if you just want to become a better speaker. So I think for me, it really started when I started working for Southwestern in college. And of course, I talk about that a lot in our heritage of our parent company of just selling educational children's books door to door, 80 hours a week, 6 days a week on straight commission. And I made about $250,000 in my 5 summers selling and recruiting students to come with me to sell. And I remember being at sales school the very first day of my very first summer in Nashville. And there was, I don't know, there was all these students in the room and hundreds of students. And this guy walked out, and he was the very first speaker, and he was just amazing. He was inspiring, and he was hilarious. And he talked to us about positive self-talk and goals, and how what we were choosing to do was face a set of fears that most people would never choose to face, and that we were choosing a path that was different from what most people on campus would ever choose. And that man really inspired me, and his name was Dan Moore, and he is the president now of the Southwestern Advantage, the sister company that still works with those students. And that was another moment when I decided this is what I want to do. And I did that for 5 years and recruited almost 60 students to come and work with me in the following summers, and made a bunch of money. And then Southwestern had hired a guy named Eric Chester to come and speak at one of our conferences. And Eric mentioned in his speech, and Eric was a Hall of Fame speaker, and he mentioned in his speech he had a son named Zach who went to CU Boulder, which was where I was recruiting. And so I went up to Eric afterwards and I said, "Hey Eric, one day I'm gonna do what you do, but right now I just need your son's phone number, because I'm gonna recruit him to come sell books with me." And Eric gave me his phone number, and that's how Eric and I got to know each other. And so that was sort of the first step. Was I worked in this direct sales, and very similar to how Brian got started, and similar to how Zig Ziglar started. And a lot of speakers have come up through that path, because there's so much growth that happens in such a short amount of time. So step 2, and this is the best advice I could give anybody that wants to become a professional speaker, was that I joined Toastmasters. And I was meeting with Eric Chester, and he said the difference between a good speaker and a great speaker is 1,000 speeches. And he's like, you have to go out and speak 1,000 times. And I said, well, how do I speak 1,000 times? Nobody knows to hire me to speak. He said, well, join Toastmasters and go and speak there. And so that's what I did. And I said, all right, I'm going to go join Toastmasters. And there's all these local clubs where you can join. There's hundreds of there's thousands of clubs all around the world, tens of thousands. There's got to be tens of thousands of clubs, and they're it's amazing. They're the most uplifting people in the world. And I joined that club, and that set me on a journey that I'll talk about here in a little bit. But then the third thing I did was I joined NSA, the National Speakers Association, which is where a lot of the great speakers, mingle and hang out. And that is where I met Zig Ziglar. That's where I met Brian Tracy. And that's where I met Mark Sanborn. And I met so many of my friends and mentors. And I'm still to this day a member of the National Speakers Association. And Toastmasters is more like the art of speaking. NSA is more of like the business of speaking. And it's for people just getting started out, really. Only about 7%, if I remember right, about 7% of NSAers make a full-time living as a speaker. So, you get involved with NSA. Then step 4 was I took Eric's advice, and I went out and spoke like crazy. I spoke 304 times for free to anybody who would listen. And I just cold called on Toastmaster clubs, Kiwanis clubs, Rotary, Chambers of Commerce, churches, schools. I did open mic nights at comedy clubs, local businesses, and anywhere that I could get stage time. And I would drive 45 minutes. I remember driving 45 minutes, more than 45 minutes, like an hour from South Denver at Denver University, where I was going to school, to Colorado Springs to get 5 minutes of stage time at a comedy club. And I would do that a bunch, and that's because Darren LaCroix, the 2001 world champion of public speaking, told me stage time, stage time, stage time. That was all that mattered. And Eric Chester said the difference between a good speaker and a great speaker is 1,000 speeches. And so I was like, man, all right, I got to get to 1,000, and so that's what I did. So I spoke a ton for free, and I video recorded myself every single time, which is step number 5. I recorded every single speech, and I watched every single one of them. I watched them over and over and over. And that is how you get good, right? Of course you don't want to watch your speech. It's terrible, right? Everyone's terrible when they start. And I was speaking to 2 people in the back of a Perkins restaurant. I'm not even exaggerating. That was the norm for me. So when I speak now in front of 10,000 people, nobody was there when I was speaking to 2 people in the back of a Perkins restaurant. And that is paying the price. And you pay the price of that dream, and you have to want it bad enough to be able to do those things. And a big part of my 304 speeches was because we started Southwestern Consulting, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But so I was doing that during the day, and I was doing all this other stuff at night, and on weekends and in the early mornings. But I recorded every speech, and Ed Tate taught me, he said, Rory, you need to watch your speech 4 different ways. He said, first of all, when you watch your video, watch it with your back to the screen so that you just listen to the presentation. He said, then watch it on mute. So that way you can catch nervous gestures and nervous tics, right? Like so you're just watching for gestures. When you watch it on mute, you're watching it in normal speed, but on mute. And then you're just seeing how your gestures are and really paying attention to that. But then you watch it on fast forward. That's how you pick up the nervous gestures and the nervous tics, because you'll see yourself like twirling your hair or tapping your foot or things that you wouldn't catch in normal speed. And then finally you watch it normal all together. And so I did that. I recorded every speech. Step 6 was I studied, right? I went to the Pioneer Leadership Program at the University of Denver, and I got a minor in leadership and accounting, and then a major in management and an MBA from the University of Denver. And that was part of the credibility, right? Was the formal education. Step 7 was I paid well over $10,000 of speech coaching in those early years. I spend way more than that. I spend probably $5,000 a year still on personal development, even though it's not all speech related nowadays. But I invested a tremendous amount of money on reading books, listening to programs, meeting with mentors and business advice, traveling to conferences, and that's how you shorten the learning curve, right? And I went on to create a bunch of those products that, it's amazing. You can go to our shopping cart and buy some of my products on speaking, and it's thousands of hours of information distilled that's available to you in a book or a 5-hour audio program that'll completely change your life, and it's just there, right? So then step 8 was I made it to the Toastmasters World Championship of Public Speaking in 2006. So there's 25,000 contestants who compete from 90 countries. And I was like, that was my dream. I said, I'm going to win the world championship. And I really had no right to think that I would. And I was probably just too naive, and just thought I would just go for it. And what the heck? And so that's what I did. I went for it. And I remember it was so exciting and exhilarating to be there. And I really wasn't ready, when I made it to the world championship. I was still working on that speech, and I lost. I was the first speaker, I was the second speaker, I remember, out of 9 speakers that year, and I lost. I didn't place, or I tied for 4th, as we like to say. And so I went back the next year, and I studied harder, and I did more, and I got more videos, and in 2007 was the year that I lost again, but I lost higher, as I like to say. I took second, and became the world champion of public speaking, first runner-up, and I was 23 years old when I was there at the world championship that year, and that launched a lot of my career. And so that was step 9, and then Step 10 was about that same time. That's when we started Southwestern Consulting. And this is another thing that is really in common from a lot of professional speakers is they go to work for a company like Tony Robbins worked for Jim Rohn, right? And Ron Marks used to run seminars for Tom Hopkins. And I think you see, like, I know Mark Sanborn and Ed Tate, those guys worked for, Ed Tate was a 2000 world champion of public speaking, and Mark Sanborn is a CPAE Hall of Fame public speaker, a good friend we've had him on the show. And many of those people have all worked for companies like Fred Pryor and so forth. And now, Southwestern Consulting, we started that business, and we're now the fastest growing for sure, and one of the only remaining, really. Even though we don't sell tickets, we sell coaching. But we do that same model, and that's what we teach all of our team members to do. We teach them how to go speak for free, and then they introduce coaching at the end. So they provide free value, like they literally go speak for free everywhere. And then at the end, they tell people about our coaching, and that's how they build their business, and they don't have to get on airplanes. And so that's what we do, and that was how I started. It just happened to be that we started our own company instead of going to work for another one, but so that was step 10. Step 11 was I got more and more stage time. So I just kept going. And I remember when I finally crossed 1,000 speeches, and I just was focused on that, getting to 1,000 speeches. And then step 12 was I hired a brilliant branding coach, which was David Averin, who was just on the show not too long ago. And he walked me through several questions, more than I've got time to talk about here. But I think, I'm going to start working on a program to walk people through this journey and the mechanics and the marketing that needs to take. I'm going to commit to you right now that I'm going to take all this and I'm going to put it together in a comprehensive course to make available to the world, because just as I'm even talking this out, there's just so much that we've done and all these people that have invested into me. And, so that the brand is a huge part of being a speaker, but it's a whole area of study in and of itself, which is one of the reasons why I still have so many marketing speakers come on the show, because it's hard and it's challenging to understand, but it's so, so critical. Step 13 was I started creating products, and that is a whole world and area of study. But creating products is huge, because when you have products, you can go speak for free, and then you can sell the products at the back of the room, and people will buy them. They'll buy them as long as you do a great job on stage. It's really easy, but there's a whole science to how you structure the offer and create the product and do the pricing sheets, and what do you say from stage, and when do you say it, and how do you say it, and what, how do you structure the bonuses and all this stuff, a whole science around doing this that I had to figure out and I had to learn. And I spent thousands of dollars investing into courses to teach us how to do that. So, but I did that. I started creating products, and all the while, right, Southwestern Consulting started to take off. So back in 2006, we started the company, and by 2007, we were doing over $1 million in revenue. And by 2008, we were doing about $2 million in revenue, and the team started to grow. And then about that time, I got to step 14, which was when I really started finally speaking for money. This was about 5 years into it. I had gotten like $50 here and there, maybe $500, but I finally started to get like a few $1,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to go out and speak. And then in 2009 was when I hired 2 program directors to assist me in calling on companies to hire me as a speaker. And the names of my 2 program directors was Mom and Wife. It's a team, right? And so I think if I had to, summarize all of this stuff into, listen to what Brian said, which was there's just so many elements of wisdom in general, but in terms of succeeding in this industry, and I just feel so lucky to personally know people like him. And if I had to look back and sort of summarize all these things, it's be a student. Every single one of these guys was a student, tremendous student. And the number 2 thing is it's not about age time, it's about stage time. You can't, the only way to become a great speaker is to get out there and speak. You have to do it over and over and over and over and over, thousands of times to really get comfortable on stage. And it's taking charge of your own success, right? You can't You can't afford to wait to be discovered. Your dream is too valuable. And that's what it was for me. And maybe your dream has nothing to do with being a speaker, but that was what mine was. And I could not wait for somebody else to just find me. I had to go out and I had to take charge of my own life, just like Brian was talking about. The third thing is be service-minded. Every one of these guys has just a heart to help other people. And that's a big part of where Southwestern Consulting's mission. We help people achieve their goals in life. That is, Southwestern's corporate family mission, but we adopted that and have championed that and really made that our own. And it's because we're service-minded as an organization. The fourth thing is don't allow your pursuit of your dream, speaking in my case, to compromise your other targets, right? Like I think a lot of people go, oh, I need to quit my job or quit what I'm focused on now so I can be a speaker. And you don't have to. You can do it on the side. You can do it every spare waking moment you have, right? Like I was in grad school when I started, and then I was selling books door to door, and then I was working at an IT firm, and then I was starting Southwestern Consulting, and you have to keep the main thing, and you work on your dream every spare second that you have. And then finally, the last thing is you got to build a team, right? How do you build? If someone asked me, how did I build an incredible speaking business? It's like I didn't. We did. I didn't. We did. You have to have a team, right? It was Eric Chester taking me under his wing, and Dan Moore, and Ed Tate, and Darren LaCroix, and Mark Brown when coaching me through the World Championship of Public Speaking, and then it was my dad building the website, and my mom making phone calls for me, and my wife, my fiance making phone calls, and our whole team at Southwestern Consulting. My original business partner Dustin, who we teamed up and had this dream, and then Southwestern believed in us, and then Dave came on board, Dave Brown, and you haven't even met him yet, but all of these people who invested into my dream. And many of them had their own dreams too, but and Southwestern Consulting certainly was a collective dream, but you have to have a team. You have to. You cannot do it alone. You have to be lifted up by mentors and partners, and there's no reason you can't do it alone. And that's one thing I love about the speaking profession is it's an industry where people share and they're open, right? I mean, just go through this entire podcast or my blog. It's all this free information. It's the heart of Cavett Robert, who was the founder of NSA, which he didn't believe in getting a bigger piece of the pie. He believed in making a bigger pie for everybody. And so it's an industry of abundance. And there's also just this direct connection between sales and speaking. And that's goes back to the very beginning of this profession, and that's, I think, just an advantage we have at Southwestern Consulting, and we have figured out how to build a model to do it without getting on an airplane, which I think is pretty special, and we just continue to attract amazing people. But whatever your dream is, I think those principles apply, and I hope hearing Brian Tracy's story, I mean, one of the greatest in the world, that'll inspire you to go out and reach your dream, to realize that you have to take control of your life. Start from where you are, because your dream matters too much to wait. You can't be discovered. You have to do it now.
Well, that about wraps up the Action Catalyst podcast for this week. If you haven't yet, please log in to whatever your favorite medium is to listen to the show, and both rate this podcast and leave a comment, as that really helps us out.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and screenshot this episode to share with your friends on social media. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst, and subscribe to our video podcast on YouTube. Thanks for listening.